like to welcome the live stream video viewers and to all of you here in the audience. One of the most respected people in metaphysics, a person that has a tremendous expertise in a great variety of topics, and he is one of the executive directors of the ARE. He will be a guest speaker also in Arkansas at the Crystal Vortex gathering that will be November 20th through 23rd with John Van Auken, Graham Hancock, William Henry, Andrew Collins, Hugh Newman, and the rest of the Earthkeeper Healer team and speakers. So at this point, John Van Auken, round of applause, please.
Love the magic of it. Well, this is a very different talk than yesterday. Angels, Fairies, and the Dark Forces. Now, I put it in that order as the title, but there's no way I'm going to go through it in that order and leave you with the Dark Forces. So actually, it's going to be the reverse. And so we will begin. The first thing I want to show you is a Cayce reading that really has a lot to say about the unseen. You may not know this, but there are 72 mentions of the unseen forces in the files of Edgar Cayce's readings. And he encouraged us to learn how to expand our consciousness to perceive the unseen forces. For him, he saw fairies, brownies, pixies, gnomes, angels, all these forces. And when he was a little boy, he played with them frequently. And his aunt used to get very upset with him for saying that he saw and played with them. But his mother, she was tender and trusted him. And one day, his mother was at the kitchen sink doing the dishes, looked up into the backyard, and she saw the fairies and the playmates of little Edgar, and she was so happy to see them because it confirmed to her that her boy was really straight up, telling her the truth. And Edgar explained that as he grew, he noticed they didn't grow. And he was getting bigger, but they were staying the same. But they always met him, and they always played. They created little hideaways and had their little time together. Often he would bring his Bible to the place, and they'd all sit around and read it together, which was really cool. And then that's when he had the childhood experience with the angel that simply appeared and said, "What do you want?" And he answered, "I want to help people, especially children." And that was it. She just disappeared, and it all started there. He made that request, and he got the response all through his life. So here's his reading on the unseen. The more often there is the indwelling, the meditating, the pondering over those things that are the periods of contact with the spiritual influences and forces, greater becomes the ability of understanding to the individual who will mentally and spiritually and truthfully indulge in such. And as the material plane is a channel, a way, a manner through and in which each soul, all souls may grow in grace and knowledge and in understanding. Thus it behooves all souls that they be oft in prayer, oft in those periods when there is an entering into the Holy of Holies as within them. The Holy of Holies has moved within each of us now, Cayce says. And the rededicating of self for that of being a channel through which the knowledge of God's love for his children may flow to others. And as you capture the essence, the spirit of that in your life and apply it daily, gradually the unseen forces are very comfortable being seen by you. Otherwise, they hide. You don't see them. Unfortunately, I have to start with the dark forces, demons, and the fallen angels. Really, this is in the Cayce Readings sufficiently to where it justifies it being a content we consider. Otherwise, I wouldn't waste your time with this, but it's important for you to understand the dark side and the history and the process that's going on related to it. Very important, and so we're going to go through this now together. It actually begins, according to Cayce, it is this, the free will was given to all the children, all of the souls conceived, received consciousness, like I said yesterday, and they received free will. And the goal was to go out and grow and learn everything you could so you could be a fascinating, enjoyable companion to your Creator and use your free will. And it was known, just like we know about our children, that you were probably going to make some mistakes. Wait a minute, I leaned on the thing there. You were probably going to make some mistakes along the way, so that was understandable. The free will is a two-edged sword in the Revelation. It's a two-edged sword. It cuts both ways, and you have to learn how to handle it carefully. But when you are exercising free will, there is a motivation to, in your process of coming to know yourself, to be yourself, to do some self-ideas. And they have a spirit of rebelliousness to them, which is natural in the soul world, just like our teenage lifetime. Our teenage spirit, our early college years, a little rebelliousness, a little use of free will in ways we thought might be interesting, was part of the process. And you'll see that in the Garden of Eden. This is the wonderful photo that I like most, where the serpent is the whispering of Eve and Adam's inner questioning of God's statement, if you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will surely die. And the serpent whispers, you will not surely die. And you go, I am immortal. This might be interesting. And like our teenagers, you engage in it, or like yourself as a teenager or early college student or your early life. And then you say to yourself, yeah, boy, may not surely die, but it sure feels like it. I think I won't do that again. But I want to point out a truth in ancient Egypt. The right eye of the divine is the eye of Ra. It is your original sight, pure and clean. The left eye is the eye of Horus, who has seen Satan, who has seen evil, who understands it and conquers it because he knows it. Horus is the redeemer in ancient Egypt because Horus faced down the dark shadow of himself and conquered it, subdued it. So in a way, you shouldn't be afraid of this. Neither should you go seeking it. But as it comes, like for example, Jesus actually teaches a very strange teaching, resist not evil. Now that's a weird statement. And if you look at him, when he's baptized by John the Baptist and receives the Holy Spirit, the very next thing he does is go into the desert and be tested by Satan. And he meets all of the tests in Satan let's say it's in his mental process of, well, you could be this with all the power you've just received. Yes, but not good, I want to do this. And after the 3 tests come, he says, "Begone, Satan, you have nothing in me." He knows he's overcome those whispering shadows that started in the Garden of Eden. That's the engaging of yourself into that trial. Same with Job and serpent's test of Job. He never cursed God. He engaged and assumed the truth about God. All merciful, all understanding, ever patient, and that turned out to be the truth. So the spirit of rebellion, here's the Cayce reading. in relation to the oneness of all force, explain the popular concept of the devil, seemingly substantiated in the Bible by many passages of Scripture. Answered by Edgar, in the beginning, celestial beings, all of you, me too. We have first the Son, the Logos. We talked about that yesterday. The prototype of beingness was conceived, and it conceived all of us beings in the prototype, or the Logos. Then the sons and daughters included. You have to understand, in classical teachings in almost every culture, the sons of God are male and female. In fact, Cayce would actually give a reading sometimes to a woman and saying, one of the sons of God. You see? So I want you to know that term is not simply masculine. Or celestial beings that are given to their force and power. Hence, that force which rebelled in the unseen forces, or the spirit, that came into activity was that influence which has been called Satan, the devil, the serpent. They are one, that of rebellion. Hence, when man in any activity rebels against the influences of good, he hearkens to the influence of evil. Hence, free will is given to man as he comes into the manifested form that we see in material forces for the choice. As given, quote from the scriptures, Deuteronomy 30, there is set before thee, man, good and evil, end quote. Evil is rebellion, good is the son of light, of life, of light, of truth, and the son of light, of life, of truth came into physical being to demonstrate and show and lead the way for man's ascent to the power of good over evil in a material world. As there is then a personal savior, there is a personal devil. And usually your spouse will point him out to you. Or someone very close and loyal to you and honest will point out your little personal devil. Or you will yourself. Oftentimes, I've heard my own self whisper, now that's a side of you you don't want to accentuate. So, keep in mind that a lot of what is called evil, Satan, devil, is a dynamic in your psyche. And you will see this when I give you the Mayan wrestling match with the Dark Lords, the same sort of concept. Here we have a William Blake illustration drawn in like a yin-yang logo, and he shows the dark and light forces wrestling within yourself. And if you go back to Cain, who kills Abel, and you look at these two names in Hebrew, Abel in Hebrew means breath, and that is your soul, the breath of life. Chapter 2, Yahweh Elohim breathed the breath of life into us, and we became living souls. Abel is the soul. Cain means acquired in Hebrew, and that's the ego that's developing. And it's important to develop. You have to come to know yourself, but you get carried away a little bit. You know, I really am pretty cool. And the next thing you know, you're suffocating the breath. Your soul is being subdued and overshadowed by your ego. Cain does that. God turns to Cain, believe it or not, and says these words, Cain, sin lies at the door of your consciousness. Its desires are for you. This is a mistype here. Its desires are for you, but you must master it. Do you see God talking to the killer of Abel? You must master this, Cain. And this is the developing ego, the acquired part of our being that's growing. And God is engaging this part. So it's important for you to know that this is one of the messages from your Creator is use your will to master this. It is happening. Its desire is for you. Engage it. Or as Jesus says, resist not evil, engage it. Find out what is there that's got you. Of course, beastly nature is part of the dark side and the loss of innocence. The loss of innocence, one of the sad things. But as much as your heart aches when you realize you've destroyed some of your innocence, there is a fire of the Spirit that will cleanse that and make you pure again. And you got to hold on to that. And when you experience that, you know nothing's impossible for you. We meet a lot of beautiful people, and Jesus says, don't judge by appearances. And I have this wonderful little drawing that I enjoy so much because I've dated a few of these. Way back when, you know. Way back when. Anyway, keep in mind that devils and demons often come in sheep's clothing and great beauty, physical dynamics that you are moved by. And here's Jesus saying, don't judge by appearances, please. Weigh the heart. Here's Cayce getting into depth psychology, Freudian psychology, very interesting. First, let us say that the essence of man is his mental body. Your mental body, your mind, his thoughts. God's thought can be defined as the angels. God's thoughts are the angels. So what you consider angels are like divinity's thought patterns and thought forms to minister to you, to help you. God thought of man as angels, but man, willing, this is willed, free-willed, created the result. This showing that our inner thoughts are not always manifested as purely in the physical as they are within our spirit, our soul. Inside influence can therefore be but our own thoughts from our own subconscious or the wide spread of the id. What is the id? In Freudian theory, the part of the psyche associated with instinctual or animalistic, instinctual, repressed, or any social desires, usually sexual and aggressive. And what do we say about TV and movies? It's all violence or sex, right? And here's Cayce saying, usually the id expresses itself. Oh, this isn't Cayce, this is a definition of Freudian id. Usually sexual or aggressive, so very much violence and sexuality are part of the id, and that's probably what sells those TV shows so much. In its efforts to satisfy these desires, the id comes into conflict with the social and practical constraints enforced by the ego and the superego. Freud defines these. The superego is the ethical component of the personality and provides the moral standards by which the ego operates. The ego is the mediator between the urges of the id and the ideals of the superego. The ego is the wrestler, the one who engages in this struggle between urges and moral or higher thoughts, higher ideals. These are twins, and you'll see this in the Revelation, two witnesses. You'll see all the twins in ancient lore around the planet, and they are so subtle, and Edgar explains just the slightest shift in your motivation takes this from the sublime to the ridiculous, from the beautiful to the ugly. And it can happen, he says, right in the midst of a conversation, of a lovemaking session, of an interaction, of a self-judgment. The slightest shift takes you right across that subtle line. And you must always watch your heart. What is motivating this? What is motivating this? And so it's often thought of as the twins. And you'll see this when I get to the Mayan stuff. Warring within self, but the destiny drives you anyway. This is the wonderful part of Cayce pointing out to you that even though you have a real messed up situation, you're struggling with a lot that seems to be overwhelming, deep in yourself, in your heart has been planted the seed of your ultimate destiny, and nothing will stop it from happening except your free will can delay it or crush it for a while, but nothing will stop it from happening. Here's the reading. It has been understood by most of those who have attained to a consciousness of the various presentations of good and evil in manifested form, as has been indicated, that the prince of this world, Satan, Lucifer, the devil, as a soul, made those necessities, as it were, of the consciousness in materiality, that man might, or that the soul might, become aware of its separation from the God force. Hence the continued warring that is ever present in materiality or in the flesh, or the warring as it is termed between the flesh and the devil, or the warring between those influences of good and evil. As the soul is then a portion of the divine, you cannot get outside the whole. You might feel like you've lost touch with the divine. You cannot get outside of the whole. You are always within the divine. The divine is ever present. The divine even tells us, if you make your bed in hell, I'll be there with you. You see, the divine, it must eventually return to that source of which it is a part. You are destined to reunite with your source of life. Destined. And yes, you are in a warring, struggling match, and it would be good if you got there with a good sense of yourself. That would be helpful. All right, now we're going to take a journey with some of the biggest dealers of the dark forces on this planet. Mayans, Toltecs, and Aztecs. Yes. We're going to enter Xibalba, which literally means the place of fear and phantoms, the underworld with the dark lords. There is a lot written by these people. You notice in Egypt, everything's bright and beautiful, but in the Mayan, Toltec, Aztec, they really engage the shadow more often than the Egyptians did. And they show it very clearly and show your wrestling match with these. So let's take the journey down there into the dark world. Deep within your subconscious, your deeper conscious, deep within your heart are motivations, unrealized desires or urges that can overwhelm you and throw a shadow over you and your good intentions. And in the Mayan story, it says, a day came when one of the dark lords gave birth to a girl, of course. I love the way this story goes. And he named her Shakwik, which means blood maiden. Now, if you're really into mystical lore, you know that the quote is, the blood cleanses from all unrighteousness. And if you know a little bit about the feminine dynamic, you know that the uterus of your consciousness, the womb of your consciousness, in the lore of femininity is shed regularly in the blood draining out, and a new consciousness, a new womb of thought is allowed to freshen itself. And you keep doing this as your consciousness keeps growing. Do you see what's going on metaphysically there? This is a terrific understanding by these ancient ones. Such an appropriate name for a daughter of the dark lord of the place of fear. Curiously, none of the dark lords realize that they have just birthed the one who would conceive the destroyer of the dark influence. And I put Shiva down there to let you know in the trinity of the Hindus, Shiva is called the destroyer. The secret is Shiva is the destroyer of the illusion. That's what people overlook. A lot of Westerners that I talk to get all uncomfortable with this destroyer. And I said, wait a minute, it's the destroyer of the illusion. Just like the womb sheds itself, its film of consciousness, every so often to bring fresh thought, fresh womb of awareness, so Shiva destroys your illusions until finally you get to full consciousness. Here is the great part of it. The dark lords have hung the head of the maize god. The maize god was supposed to overthrow the dark lords, the maize god twins. They went down there and they were defeated. And in the defeat, they took the head of one of the maize gods off and hung it on a tree. And it's forbidden to go to this place called the place of sacrifice. It's a dark, dangerous place, and it's forbidden to go there. But Shaquique is a daring and brave woman. She goes to this dangerous, forbidden place, and she approaches the head of the maize god twin. He says for her to approach and lets the spittle of his godliness fall into her palm, and she instantly is impregnated with godly life force. Here's the quote, the way it's written. In that instance, the skull let drops of spittle fall directly into the maiden's palm. She looked quickly and intently at her palm, but the spittle of the skull was not there. Then the skull of the maize god said, quote, in my saliva and spittle, I have given you my descendants. Now my head has nothing on it anymore. It is nothing but a skull without life. Go up then to the surface of the earth, that you may not die. Believe in my words, that it will be so. Thus spoke the head of the maize god twin. Now here is a passage that follows this. Now all that Shaquique and the maize god did together was by order of the heart of heaven. Somehow within them, they were moved by this great influence of the heart of heaven to meet one another and to engage in this transfer of the previous godly energy that lost to the Dark Lords into the womb of this new hope. And she rises and gives birth to the hero twins who ultimately defeat the Dark Lords. And we see a picture of them drawn here by the Mayans in their full game uniform to play the ball game. And they have right thoughts on their minds and white breath in their nostrils. See their nostrils? Some more powerful than the others. Now, do you see the black and red circle on the one on the left? That means he is not incarnate. He is in spirit, and the one on the right is incarnate. And notice the breath in the one on the spirit's much more powerful than the breath of the one incarnate. So it's showing you this duality. When Edgar Cayce was asked to explain the two witnesses in the Revelation and this idea of the twins, he said, they are your two levels of mind working together. One is your conscious mind that's out here, and the other is behind the veil, your subconscious mind. And they start working together. The maiden ascended out of the dark and gave birth to a new set of twins, the hero twins. Despite how the hero twins were being treated by their family, they held no anger or bitterness toward them. In fact, the hero twins held no negative thoughts towards anyone. Their minds were clear and their hearts were calm. However, they possessed the fearlessness of their maiden mother. She entered the place of sacrifices alone and against the curse of the Dark Lords. This would prove to be their most powerful asset when they eventually face the Dark Lords in the place of fear and phantoms, Xibalba. Unlike the maize god twins, their father and uncle, the hero twins were never tricked by the Dark Lords. Thus, there was no laughter shared by the Dark Lords, only concern and wonderment. After all the tests, including the night in the House of Gloom, the hero twins overcame every test in the darkness and deaths. They knew deep within themselves that this was all an illusion designed to create confusion, doubt, and fear. Using quiet, enduring faith, some magic, much cleverness, the hero twins caused one death and seven death. See the symbolism there? 7 spiritual centers. One death and 7 death to be no more. So the Dark Lords had lost their power. Here is Itzamna teaching the hero twins how to engage in the battle with your dark forces. Even though the maize god twins were gods, they were naive and immature, and so have you and I been. Why? Because they represented an early phase of our growth as the children of God coming out of heaven into this world to learn and grow. Jesus has also taught this. He said that we are, quote, sheep in the midst of wolves, end quote. And he instructed us to be, quote, wise as serpents, but harmless as doves, end quote. Matthew 10. The hero twins reached a level that the maize gods had not. But here goes its ominous lesson of the four illusions, and I think this helps us a great deal to hear the four illusions as the Maya saw it. The first illusion is there is only one way to lose this game, and it's for you to quit. If you keep getting up, the game goes on. There is only one way to lose the game: stop playing. As long as you keep getting up from any losses or disappointments, you have the opportunity to win the game. Tip: even death is not a game ender because your soul never dies. Edgar Cayce taught, quote, keep on keeping on, be cheerful, knowing that as he sees fit, so will he give. Keep on working with, for, toward the more perfect understanding. Illusion buster number 1. Number 2, Shaquique teaches the hero twins, the more you play the game, the more you learn. The game requires that you face your opponent, come to know him, learn his strengths and weaknesses, and then engage him in a struggle for a higher ideal. In the game of life, your opponent lives in the underworld of your thoughts, emotions, and urges. These influences challenge you, often overcome you, and keep you from victory. You must become aware of them, engage them, and ultimately, as God said to Cain, master them. Illusion Buster 3, all the monsters you see are wearing masks. Forces opposing your efforts to become your better self often appear to be monstrous and unbeatable. But this is only their appearance. It is not their true nature. Many humans have faced terrible beasts in their lives and are victorious. Jesus taught, quote, with men it is impossible, but not with God, for all things are possible with God. Illusion Buster 4, you have powerful help. Fear of the challenge and doubt about your abilities are your greatest opponents. Courage, faith, and endurance are your teammates. But it helps to know that you have latent talents and unseen heavenly help. Cayce taught, quote, that you are alive, that you are conscious, that you have the opportunity in this period to apply yourself in the reconstruction of what man is to look forward to, should encourage you to know that God is mindful of each soul. Then use the abilities that you have, and you have many. So as you see in the dark forces, a great deal of it is not to be avoided, but engaged and understood and subdued, mastered. And much of it is within yourself. If you look at the story of Shaquique and the maize god and the hero twins, they are all energetic dynamics within your own psyche. And all the dark lords are the same. And this dynamic within you is engaged in a soul growth that requires that you exercise your will to become a master of all the influences that you wrestle with. Now, if you try to project this around yourself, that's true too. Now, out here, you also are engaged in a lot of situations and dynamics that can overwhelm you, but you must engage them, and in engaging them, do so with a sense of the higher forces, of the greater abilities, or as I showed you yesterday, the fruits of the Spirit. They are more powerful than you think, and as you engage them, you transform the outer life as well. Okay, we're out of the dark forces, thank God. Now we're with the fairies. And as I told you, Edgar saw these creatures, mostly when he was younger and then towards the latter part of his life. But many others did, and there's a story at ARE of the prayer group leader, Ruth Lenore. Way back, I was there when I was probably around 24 years old in the 70s. Oops, I just gave away I'm real old. Anyway, Ruth Lenore, I worked with her, I knew her. She was a blithe spirit of holiness and yet cantankerousness. She was a wrestler for the light. And one day she was coming down the stairs from the headquarters building at ARE on the campus there, and she saw in the camellia bush all the brownies were standing on the leaves in their red and green outfits with their curly shoes and their little curly hats. And they said, "Ruthie, go get your camera and we'll let you take a picture of us." Well, Hugh Lynn Casey's office was right next to that camellia bush, and he saw them outside the window of his office. So she gets the camera, he comes out, the two of them are looking at him, and when the word gets around, some other staff members come, but they can't see them. Only Hugh Lynn and Ruth can see the little brownies. So they take pictures and they show the pictures around. So, I mean, this is very real. And I'll share some more as we go along. Okay, so there's also fairyland, which is, Edgar says, is just beyond the veil of the three-dimensional materialistic world, physical world, just slightly on the other side. And they can come through the veil anytime they feel necessary or that you are deserving of it. And you can go through the veil anytime you develop an awareness, you expand your consciousness to be aware of them. I had to throw this in because I just love comedy a little bit. This is the captured fairy princess sitting there on the stone, and this is the troll mother saying to her, "Look at them," troll mother said. "Look at my sons. You won't find more beautiful trolls on this side of the moon." And she's trying to marry one of her trolls to the fairy princess. That's John Bauer's stuff. Great stuff, but I just got a kick out of this one and had to stick it in there. Okay, Morgan Le Fay, and Le Fay is French fairy, and the Fates. It is difficult to identify the origin of fairies. It really is. Even the name's origin is a bit uncertain. Many researchers believe that the name originated with the Roman Tria Fata, the three fates. And this is classical. I mean, it's everywhere. We find this in the Italian name Fata Morgana, which is, Morganus is a god, but Morgan Le Fay is a fairy who is the fairy aspect of the goddess Morgana. It gets a little, you are multidimensional too, so it's not fair to lay a heavy trip on Morgana here. But multi-levels of Morgan Le Fay, her godly nature is Morgana. Her fey nature is Morgan. The famous enchantress and half-sister of King Arthur. We'll learn more about her in a minute. From the French, la fée meaning fairy. Fairies are often considered to be enchantresses, not in deceptive ways, but by virtue of their magical beauty, music, and song, and they love to dance. That's why they need the elves and leprechauns to make shoes, because they dance all the time. That's the truth. That's the legend. Morgan Le Fay may have also been the goddess Morganus who transported King Arthur to Avalon to heal him. Remember, even though Morgan Le Fay deceives Arthur out of revenge for what Arthur's father did to her mother, she eventually takes the goddess higher ideal role and carries his wounded body to Avalon with her sister fairies to help heal him. Fairies are depicted in many, many ways, and I just show you how many people over time have depicted them. I want to point out this one on your upper right is the more realistic because, believe it or not, until the Victorian period, fairies never had wings. But as we move towards the age of reason, you couldn't fly without wings, so they started putting wings on them because magic was no longer approved. Do you believe that? But prior to the Victorian period, fairies never had wings, could fly using magic. So the one in the upper right is more typical of what a fairy was like. But you also need to know that classically, some fairies, there are different types of fairies, are full-grown women. and even married human men, mostly because human men were attracted to them, their blithefulness, their spirit, their music, their dance, and their beauty, of course. So here you see them with little fairies around them, but also their full-grown female fairies. Fairies are also in two groups, the solo fairy on the left there, and the troop fairies. They travel in troops. But like in my garden about 3 years ago, I had a single fairy in the garden. So she would have been a solo fairy, because a troop fairy would never be without the other fairies. And she hung around for a while. I don't know what I had planted that it caught her, but then she was gone. Here are some classical drawings of fairies in the previous century. And you'll notice that there are little elves making shoes for the fairies because they just won't stop dancing and wearing their shoes out. Here are the brownies, and this is what Ruth and Yulin and even Edgar saw, and he also was giving this reading, believe it or not, to an oil man. How many of you are from Texas or Oklahoma? You're going to love this. One of the most shocking readings Edgar Cayce gave was to an oil man seeking help finding a new oil field. The man asked if he should seek the help of a person in New York City or another in London, to which Edgar, in trance, replied, quote, "Rather had the entity best listen to the voices from within that present themselves as the activities about the entity, or brownies." Can you imagine this oil man? I can picture him sitting there right now. I paid for this? Brownies? Yes, brownies. This had to be a shock to those listening to this instruction. In fact, they were so surprised that they followed up the reading with another the very next day asking, quote, "What is meant by the term brownies?" And the last answer of the check reading, end quote. The sleeping Cayce replied, quote, "The manner in which those of the elementals, entities who have not entered into materiality, have manifested and do at times manifest themselves to the entity, to this oil man," and they replace his name with his number, 1265. Apparently, this oil man was being approached by brownies, but was not listening to them. Cayce went on to explain, quote, "Brownies, pixies, fairies, gnomes are not elementals technically, but elements that are as definite entities as man materialized." What he's saying is the elementals are the fundamental elements of creation. They are not entities. But when he says these are of the elementals, he means they are individualized essences of the elements of nature. But they are entities, and that's true. All fairies, all brownies, all pixies have personality, have unique individuality. Here we see Cayce parsing the details of elementals and entities, clarifying that fairies are of the elementals, but are in fact individuated entities like human beings are as well. Gnomes, he said to this one lady, quote, "Don't be afraid to acknowledge that you see fairies as you study, for you will nurture these experiences. Don't be afraid to say that you see the gnomes, which would hinder people's at times. Do you know gnomes are notoriously, legendarily known as troublemakers for human beings, and they delight in it." So when the travel agency picked it as a symbol of their, I said to myself, boy, did they make a mistake, you know? And remember when General Motors picked Saturn as their ideal car, and I told you yesterday, Saturn is where everybody goes to be redone. To another person getting a past life reading, he explained, quote, "Before this incarnation, the entity was in the Scotland land." If you've ever been there, you know it's fairyland. "The entity began its activities as a prodigy, as one already versed in its associations with the unseen or the elemental forces. The fairies, and those of every form that do not give expression in a material way, and are only seen by those who are attuned to the infinite." See, catch that. Expand your consciousness and you will be able to see beyond the veil. Let's now explore the lore and legend of all the unseen beings that are often listed among the mystical little people. The list would look something like this: fairies, pixies, sprites, brownies, nixies, gnomes, nature spirits, kobolds, duendes, goblins, wee folk, elves, fauns, trolls — we already met the troll mother — the fates, and so on. Though certainly among ancient lore and legend there are mermaids, mermen, centaurs, satyrs, sirens, harpies, and others of this kind, they are not of this group. They are not of the little people. Edgar explains that they are actually a mistake that occurred when human souls came into this dimension. There were no human bodies, and they pushed their minds and spirits into animal bodies, and you had half horse, half man. And it was a terrible mess. And he said ancient temples were designed to help throw off these animal influences from human souls and purify them, and to develop pure human bodies. The Maya say there were 3 ages, that first 2 ages were all this terrible immersion into matter that wasn't prepared for them. And then the third sun, or third age, the children of God went before Mother God and said, Mom, we're in deep trouble. This place possesses us. We're trapped. We're captured. And she says, bring me the ashes of all your mistakes and the spittle of the water that comes from within you. And she makes the blue maize people perfect in every way, and that's the first human body. Edgar Cayce says it actually occurred in Atlantis, and they started incarnating in a body meant for them. But he does explain that body was nowhere near as dense as the one we're using today. But then he says, you are coming upon an age in which a new body type is going to be developed, and it will have 12 chakras instead of 7. And one guy asked him to name the 12, and Edgar in trance said, why? You're not using the 7. I love Edgar Cayce. Okay, fairies. There's a lot of misconception about fairies. Even in the Middle Ages there was. So let me address some of these. Fairies are not angels. They are not fallen angels. They are not dead humans. Those are ghosts. Or beastly offspring of ancient creatures. No. But you will find this in some of the books you buy. Surprisingly, and unlike angel lore, fairy lore never described them as having wings. That was a modern invention, likely in a semi-scientific attempt to explain how they could fly, since magic was no longer an acceptable explanation. The idea of fairies having butterfly or dragonfly wings came during the Victorian era from 1837 to 1901. Prior to this, all fairies flew without wings via magic. Some fairies used enchanted ragwort stems, like the enchanted brooms of witches. Some even flew on the backs of birds, like humans ride on the backs of horses. But some, like the Lady of the Lake in the Arthurian legends and others, simply used their magic to fly. And they could fly while carrying the dead weight of a full-grown human man, like King Arthur wounded. Remember, Morgan Le Fay picked him up off the battlefield. She is a fairy. And carried him to Avalon. And she has no wings. So they have power. They really do have some amazing magical power. Elves are very different and should clearly be differentiated from fairies. Up until we got to the Elizabethan era, 1558 to 1603, when they were mixed together indiscriminately. But prior to that, this era, elves were clearly not fairies. In fact, elves were always more serious than fairies. Elves had burdens to carry and responsibilities to tend to, while fairies mostly lived with light hearts, music, dancing, and a carefree nature. That is, until they came into contact with humans and human problems and troubles. Elves have pointed ears, fairies did not. Elves have human weaknesses more so than fairies. And in the case of fairies, their failings are due more to loving naivety, whereas elves have urges and seek to satisfy them by any means necessary. Much of the older elven lore and legend reveals especially strong libidos in elven men, even to the point of seeking out human women for sex. Fairies have no such legends. You can go as far back as you want, you won't find that in them. So here are some of the modern depictions of elves and some of the crazy ones. All right, here are some of the classical ones, and I want to show you a photo. Now, believe me, I am not naive enough to think this is a legitimate photo. It could have been doctored, may probably have. But here is the illustration by this artist of what elves look like, and then here's a photo claiming to have spotted one of these. I don't know if it was staged or not, but you see the similarities in the ears and the head, the bald head and all. Leprechauns. Believe it or not, fairies cannot survive without leprechauns because fairies are airy-fairy and don't pay attention to their money, so they made a deal with the leprechauns. You keep our gold, and that's why leprechauns have a pot of gold, and you take care of our money and pay our bills, and we'll just dance and sing and play. And leprechauns agreed to that deal. Leprechauns also make their shoes. Now, at this point, I want to share with you a present life experience with angels and leprechauns. My youngest brother was in my Irish mother's house crying on the living room floor because it was the Vietnam War and his lottery number was very low. He was going to be pulled. He knew it. And he didn't want to go to war. He was crying on her living room floor, and he has shared this story with me several times, way back when he was younger, too. And suddenly he felt a presence in the Irish mother's house. He looked up, and here was a leprechaun with his hands on his hips like this, with the apron on, the red beard, the whole thing. And he looked at him, and he said, "You ain't going anywhere." And Paul said, "I just blinked. That's all I did," and he was gone. But the power of his words were so overwhelming that I knew he was absolutely telling me the truth. And even though I had a very low lottery number, I wasn't going to be drafted. And sure enough, he wasn't. I was already in the Navy. Yeah. But I had a pretty angelic protection going. I was walking out of the hangar and boot camp to my first naval assignment, and there was a gray Navy bus here, and everybody getting on that was going to Nam. And there was a silver Trailways bus over here. And I looked at my orders, I opened them up and looked at them, and the boatswain mate was standing next to me, and it said Pensacola. I'd never heard of the word, so I thought it was in Nam. And I turned to the boatswain and I said, "Boatswain, where in Nam is Pensacola?" He said, "Van Auken, get on this silver bus, it's in Florida." I said, "What?" 2 of us got on that bus. 30 of us got on the gray bus. And now the angel was still with me. I arrive in Pensacola, and sure, I'm going to get dirt job somewhere in the Navy. And I'm walking up, and there's a line, and finally it's my turn, and there's this big, ugly, mean Marine sergeant sitting there assigning us. And I thought, oh, God, he's going to have me doing garbage for 2 years. Suddenly, a beautiful, lovely, elderly woman comes up and says, "Okay, Max, you're relieved. I'll take care for a while." He goes away. She comes. I walk up. She turns to me and says, "Where would you like to work?" I look, "Where are you?" I said, "Well, honestly, I'm an airman, and I would love to work at air operations at the airport of Pensacola. It's a real busy airport." She said, "Okay, honey." She writes it down. Yeah. So I take my orders, I go up to air operations, the big airport, I'm so excited. I open the door to my assigned office area. There are nothing but waves in there. You know what a wave is, don't you? It's a female Navy personnel. I look and I go, oh my God, I've died and gone to heaven. I'm like 19 years old. Woo! It gets even better. I'm not in the Navy, I don't know, 9-10 months, and the Secretary of the Navy, McNamara, comes out and says, listen, if you want to get out, I will give you an exit out of the Navy if you will promise to stay in the reserves for 4 years and I can call you up anytime I need you. I thought, hey, wait a minute, that's a pretty good deal. I took it. I was out of the Navy. I went to college. And one day I came to the mailbox, several years, had passed a few years. I open it up, and it is my honorable discharge, and I had forgotten I was still in the Navy. See, I didn't have any bad karma with war, neither did Paul, my youngest brother. Okay, Enchantresses. Carrie Dwin is one of the classical enchantresses in ancient stories, but so in Egypt is Anhai. She has her own papyruses, her own magical spells. Enchantresses have been around since ancient Egypt and before, and they are able to pull on unseen forces and make things happen for people or affect people's situations. One of the qualities assigned to Morgan Le Fay is that she is an enchantress, a seductress, or a tormented woman. You will understand this when you see what she dealt with here. So over on the left side, you see Morgan Le Fay making herself as pretty a woman as possible and going to her half-brother Arthur, King Arthur eventually, to deceive him. But the reason is Arthur's father, quote, quote, raped her mother. Now, I put quotes around it because he came in the form of Igraine's husband. So Igraine thought she was making love with her husband. And it was Merlin who did the magic to cause Uther to look like Igraine's husband. But little baby Morgan Le Fay was in the crib next to them, and she saw clearly that this was Uther in disguise. And she resented this. And so eventually, the child of Igraine and Uther became King Arthur, and Morgan Le Fay did the same karmic thing to him that he had done, or that his father had done to her mother. And they created Mordred, and that was the one who eventually wounded Arthur, but he killed Mordred as well. On the lower right, you'll see Lady Igraine. She really was actually the Duchess of Cornwall, and a beautiful woman married to a duke, and so it is a story that many people are trying to find hard evidence on, but there's a sufficient amount of stuff. If you go into it, you'll find all that stuff. Okay, now we jump to the Fates, and these go way, way back. In Greek mythology, the Moirai, often known in English as the Fates, were the white-robed incarnations of destiny. The dynamic essence of destiny incarnates in three women called the Spinner, the Allotter, and Unreturnable. And they control the thread of life of every mortal from birth to death. They were independent and impersonal. They watched that the fate assigned to every being by eternal laws might take its course without obstruction. And of course, the greatest Greek story is Oedipus Rex, in which they conveyed just how much they believed that destiny, no matter all the efforts by humanity to knock destiny off track, eventually reaches its ultimate outcome. These views of fate imply that somehow time and space are not sequential, but the past and the future exist at the same time. Thus, the future is known now. Now, here's your biggest proof. Do you know that in the great pyramid in Giza, carved inside it is actually the whole story of the descent of the children of God and the ascent to the time when we ascend back. And this was discovered first in the 1600s, but really aggressively in the 1800s. And I wrote all about it in my book, 2038 Great Pyramid Timeline Prophecy. You will be amazed. When I first discovered this, I said, now wait a minute, even if I use archaeology, that pyramid is 5,000 years old, 2,500 BC. How could they know what's going to ultimately come? Unless, as we were coming in, we knew the ultimate destiny that we would travel to get out. And according to many ancient philosophies, that is exactly what's known. You are living out your destiny. You still have free will in the midst of destiny, mostly to choose how you're going to react. But you can change the future. And you can change the past by certain shifts that occur now. Cayce's readings appear to support this idea when viewed from a higher level of perception. Quote, time is as one time, space as one space, to the cosmic conscious. Whoa. Okay, now we're getting into angels. I hope I'm doing good on time here. Angel lore is the most fascinating. The first thing you need to know is classically and broadly across all scholars, it is agreed the initial creation of angels was two companies. Seraphim, which are literally in Hebrew, beings of fire with 6 wings. And they are engaged often with Isaiah, and you see them bringing purification to Isaiah's eyes and to his tongue. These are beings of fire. Edgar Cayce explains that they're absolute truth. You can't go into the presence of the seraphim and say, well, you know, free will's really hard, and I've been doing the best I can. You either are or you aren't. Get out of here. Cherubim is the other company of angels, thank God, and they are the loving, the understanding, but they are also the guardians. You know, when we were pushed out of the Garden of Eden, which was direct contact with the Creator all the time, a cherubim was put over the tree of eternal life, of immortality. Fortunately, in the Revelation, the cherubim move and allow us to eat from the tree of life and live forever. Cherubim are also the angels on the Ark of the Covenant. See the ark there? This one in dead center on the bottom is from the movie Lost Ark. But the one on the right is the one I'm more into, because you see cherubim have 4 wings and the one on the right has 4 wings. The one on the left has 6 wings. That is a seraphim. It was said, and this drawing doesn't convey it, that seraphim will hide their face from you because you can't look into them, and they will hide your feet with 2 sets of wings, 2 sets, and they fly with the other set. And that was the legend. This on this church, they draw a seraphim, but they let you see his face and all. Also, there are 9 choirs of angels. This is well known, goes way, way back. Seraphim, cherubim, thrones, dominions, virtues, powers, principalities, archangels, and angels. One thing you should know is that the principalities are upset with God for allowing man to redeem himself. That's the only choir of angels that really doesn't like us. They think we should have been wiped out for what we did. But all the others love us and want to help us, especially the archangels and angels. Now, the most famous angels are Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. All the angels have like hundreds of names, secret names. Michael's secret name is Sabathiel, and it comes from the Sabbath, and that means the intermission. Michael is the guard of the silent period in which you attempt to make contact with the source of your life. So that intermission of activity and of free will use in which you seek to reattune quietly to the source, Michael guards. Now, if we go to the Kabbalah, this is the tree of life on the left, and it's one of the alternative interpretations of the 10 emanations. the great I am at the top and the little I am at the bottom. But in Kabbalah, they also assign the angels to each of these emanations, and that's what you see on the right. The 10 major angels at the top is Metatron, and at the bottom is Metatron. And it is believed that Metatron is the highest angel, and Metatron saw our problem and decided the only way, I have to use the male pronoun, but I don't mean it that way. The only way he could help us was to come down and experience what we were experiencing. So he becomes the little I am, even though he is an expression of the great I am. And in so doing, we all gain redemption as well by this help. And of course, Gabriel's the closest. You may not know this, but Michael is the guardian angel of the Israelites, and Gabriel is the guardian angel of the Ishmaelites, who ultimately become the Arab Muslims. And Gabriel appears to Hagar, who is the mother of Ishmael, and tells her that God will make a great nation out of her son and protect her. She's crying in the desert because she's been kicked out of the camp with Abraham. You see, Sarah was 90 years old, and she had been promised to deliver the child who would be the leader of the Israelites. And she said, look, Abraham, I've gone past my midlife change. How am I going to deliver a baby and all this? Why don't you go into my handmaid and have the promised baby with her? And like a typical man, he goes, okay. Doesn't pause to think about it at all. Sure enough, she gives birth to Ishmael. What do you think happens to Sarah a week later? She gets pregnant at 90 and delivers Isaac, which means God made me to laugh because I got pregnant at 90. Here's the Imperium. There are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of angels at multi-levels, and Gustave Doré drew this so beautifully that I thought I would share it with you so you could see. The closer you get to the light, the less individualized you are. You become more one with the light. The further you come away, the more individualized you get. So at the bottom, you see individual angels, and you also see Dante standing there in a physical body in a robe. Behold, till thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days sat, a swift stream of fire issued forth from before him. Thousands of thousands ministered to him, and 10,000 times 100,000 stood before him. The judgment sat, and the books were opened. And everything you and I thought is recorded in those books. Egad. And then this is William Blake at the bottom, drawing the great creator, opening the book of life of all the children and all the angels watching. Here you see Elijah being fed in the desert by an angel. And on the right, you see Jacob wrestling with the angel of God until he gives him his blessing and his name. And that gives Jacob the power to become an enlightened leader because he wrestled with the angel. On the left, you see Gabriel speaks to Mary in a manner that is so unusual. Mary is enlivened with the Spirit and conceives with the Holy Spirit the Messiah. On the right, you see the fallen angel diagram by Gustave Doré. Here you see William Blake's attempt to convey Jacob's dream, where he sees a ladder going all the way up to heaven and down, and angels rising and descending that ladder. Here you see William Blake's drawing of Lucifer on the left. That glorious angel is Lucifer before he sinned. And believe it or not, there are elements in the secret teachings that Lucifer will be redeemed. And the phrase is, the morning star will rise again. And that is Lucifer. It's very strange, hard to accept, but anyway, it is in the lore. On the right, you see William Blake's painting of the angels guarding Jesus' body in the tomb. Here you see the body rising and the angels protecting Jesus. Below you see Blake's attempt at Jacob wrestling with the angel. Latin angelicus, Greek angelos, from the Hebrew for one going or one sent, meaning a messenger. In Hebrew, it denotes either a divine or a human messenger. The Greek Old Testament renders it by angelos, which also can be human or divine. Remember yesterday I told you about Gertrude, one time was a guardian angel to Andrew, you know. So humans can actually become angelic. I'll share a personal story. My young daughter had her first child and was suffering with this baby one night, and it just kept crying and crying. And my daughter was becoming exhausted. It was like 2:30 in the morning, and she was weakening and sat down exhausted in the corner of her little cracker box ranch house, crying all alone, holding this baby who couldn't stop crying. And suddenly, her deceased mother appeared to her. Now, my daughter said to me she was so exhausted she was slipping in and out of twilight, trying to hold the baby, but she was in extreme despair. And suddenly, she was pretty sure she was in the twilight. She saw her deceased mother appear and take the baby from her. And she said, "Oh, don't do that. I want the baby to fall asleep." And the mother smiled and started to expand and glow, and suddenly enormous wings came out of her deceased mother, so much so that they overwhelmed the little small hallway in her cracker box ranch house that she was in. And Jacqueline became overwhelmed, and the baby fell asleep. And then when her husband got up the next morning, he found them in the guest bed totally asleep. And my daughter said, "I don't recall ever moving to that bed. So I'm not sure whether we were carried there or what." But as you can see, a human soul discarnate can come with the power of its angelic self. Cayce gives us an example out of the Revelation. He says that Peter and John were arrested together, and because of Peter's disposition, they were going to kill him. They were going to crucify him. But they banished John to the island of Patmos. Peter turns to John and says, "After my demise, I will endeavor to come to you." Then Edgar says, in the Revelation chapter 19, when John's in a ecstatic state, he sees an angel of the Lord come to him, and he falls down to worship it. Nobody reads what the angel says to John. The angel says, "Oh no, don't do that. I'm your brother in this situation." What angel is my brother? "You worship the Lord," the angel says. And Edgar says that was Peter in the glorified body, his angelic body, coming to John during his revelation. So keep that in mind. You are really a lot cooler than you might realize. John the apostle writes, "I looked and heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands and 10,000 times 10,000. Angels are represented throughout the body as a body of spiritual beings ministering, not just messengers, between God and humans. Quote, "You have made him," human beings, "a little less than the angels," Psalm 8. Unlike humans, angels are spirits. Are they not all ministering spirits sent to minister to them who shall receive the inheritance of salvation? The humans receive it. Angels are not biological beings, we are. Therefore, they don't have gender. Gender is biological. So an angel possesses both of these qualities, not in a biological quality, but in a spiritual quality. The mission of the angelic community is assistance. Matthew 18, Jesus refers to this mission, quote, "See that you do not despise one of these little ones." He's talking about children surrounding him. "For I tell you that in heaven their angels always behold the face of my Father who is in heaven." And I know many of you look at little children and you can see that angelic stuff is still connected to them. And you just hope they don't lose it on their way. Jacob has visions of angels ascending Hagar in the wilderness. Angels draw Lot out of Sodom. They tell Gideon to save his people. Angels get involved in a lot of things. Edgar Cayce was asked, explain enlisting the aid of angels and its spiritual and material significance to those particular entities. Every experience is an assurance, he says, and as he has given, behold, the face of the angels ever stands before the throne of God. The awareness in self that thou may be one with, equal with the Father God, as his child, as the brother, sister of the Christ, thy Savior, thy brother. And as the awareness comes, it is the angel of hope, the angel of announcing, the angel of declaiming, the angel that would warn, the angel that would protect. For these are ever as awarenesses, as consciousnesses of the abiding presence that, quote, he hath given his angel charge concerning thee, end quote, by that very desire that the Lord, thy will be done within me today. And guardian angels and all, let me just move forward because, well, you see here, the reason I want to stop here is because Hinduism also has this idea of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and Edgar says body, mind, and soul. In Hinduism, it's Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are the trinity of the divine, and Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the engager with you in life, the expression of the Atman, and Shiva is the destroyer of the illusions. Now, this is my last slide, and I want to point out to you at the bottom, Edgar Cayce says that you connect with the Creator through thy angel, through thyself that is the angel. You have an angelic part to you, and you can tap into it. And when you do, it is ever before the throne of God, and you can communicate using that. And then I put my website there. I will send you a free copy of my newsletter. If you go there and ask for it, I will let you take a look at it. Okay, we'll stop there.
Another round of applause for the amazing John Van Auken. Can you not feel the uplifting energy and the brightness? Anytime I'm feeling a little low at home, I listen to one of John's lectures and it cheers me up. So another round of applause for John, please.
Fairies.